we are going to be talking about quadratic equations for the next week or so. P5 will start today. We'll add some more to it on Monday, and we'll clean it up on Wednesday of next week. P7 deals with quadratic equations and solving things graphically, so we'll hit that up for sure next week, Thursday, and next week, Friday. Okay. Again, you will be having your Chapter P test on the 19th. Okay. So a quadratic equation in X is one that can be written of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. The major part to that quadratic equation is the exponent right there. That has to be a 2. Your biggest exponent in a quadratic equation is 2. Okay? And you have to have an exponent of 2 in order for it to be a quadratic equation. Okay? You will hear us refer to your toolbox. Okay? It's that imaginary place that you have all of your mathematical tools. You keep your tools in the toolbox. For solving quadratic equations, you have many tools. Okay? One of your tools is factoring. One of your tools is graphing. One of your tools is completing the square. One of your tools is the quadratic formula. Okay? So all of those are different ways that you can factor, or take that back, that you can solve a quadratic formula. Okay? Now, in the end, your answer is going to look like take one of 3 forms. It's either going to be a real and rational number, like x equals 5, x equals 7/4, something along that line. Or it's going to be a real and irrational number, x equals 4 plus the square root of 7 is a real and rational number, or irrational number. Or it may take the form of an imaginary number, 2i times the square root of 3, negative 4i. Those are imaginary numbers. Okay? So we have everything available to us in terms of answers. Okay? So let's dive in. Let's start with factoring, then we'll go to graphing, then we'll go to completing the square, and then we'll end up with the quad form. Okay? All right, so factoring. The first thing that you need to do when you are factoring is you need to set it equal to 0. If it's not equal to 0, you got to get it equal to 0. Okay? That's going to be a common theme in all of these. Get it equal to 0. Get your equation equal to 0. Go up in your grill. Okay? Oops, that's right. I got to come around this way too. Better enough. Got to get it equal to 0. Okay? All right? This one is done for us. Okay? 4x squared minus 8x plus 3 is equal to 0. So now I can factor. Thinking back to ways to factor, what are some different types of factoring methods that you know of? The 2 butt cheeks. Yep, exactly. Okay, factoring a trinomial with the 2 sets of parentheses. We refer to it as the butt cheeks because it looks like a pair of butt cheeks. It happens. Everybody's got one. Okay? All right? What else? What's another way to factor? Nope. That's the way to solve. Greatest common factor? Take out a GCF. Okay. Difference of perfect squares. Well, it's cubes we don't have to worry about. What else? Factoring by grouping. Okay. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can factor. Okay. In this particular one, I'm going to go with the 2 sets of parentheses. Okay. Now, when we're doing the 2 sets of parentheses, okay, what we look at is we look at the first term, my quadratic term. Those two are, we're going to break that term up into two terms that multiply together, and that's going to go in that first slot. Okay? And then I'm going to look at that last term, my constant term, and that's going to go in that second position inside those parentheses. Now, the nice thing about 3 is that I only have one choice. There's only two things that multiply together to be 3, and that's 1 and 3. So I can fill that one in right away. Okay? With 4x squared, I got two choices. I got 1x and 4x, or I've got 2x and 2x. Okay? Me, I like to start in the middle and work my way out. So I'm going to try 2x and 2x. When I was at your age, I learned how to multiply binomials by something called FOIL. First, outers, inners, last. Okay? We call it FOIL. You guys were brought up in a system where it's called a double distributive property. They both are the same thing. Okay? So my first two here, my two orange ones, multiply together to be 4x squared, which is good because I got a 4x squared in my original problem. My first orange and second purple multiply together to be 6x. My first purple and second orange multiply together to be 2x. Well, 6x and 2x combine to be 8x, which is good because I need an 8x in my problem. And 1 times 3, the two purples, is 3. So this would all work out as long as I go minus and minus, because then I get my negative 8x. And I get my positive 3. Okay, so we factored it. Yahoo for school. Next, we're going to set each of those factors equal to 0. And then we're going to solve those equations. Well, first I'm going to add 1. Then I'm going to divide by 2. I'm going to get x equals 1/2. Then I'm going to add 3. I'm going to divide by 2. I'm going to get x equals 3/2. And my two solutions then for this problem are 1/2 and 3/2. If I plug 1/2 in for x into 4x squared minus 8x plus 3, I get 0. 1/2 squared is 1/4 times 4 is 1. 1/2 times negative 8 is negative 4. 1 minus 4 is negative 3 plus 3 is 0. Okay? And if I plug in 3/2, I also get 0. Okay? So I solved this one. Okay? Graphically now, on the calculator, okay, I would, first off, I'd add a graph. And then I would say to myself, as long as I have my equation equal to 0, bring this down just a little bit, that way we can see it. Okay? As long as my equation here is equal to 0, I can just type in the other side. So 4x squared minus 8x plus 3. Shabam, there it is. Okay? And then I can do multiple things with that. Now, I could zoom in on it for sure. I can move it around, and you can do all of that on yours also. Okay? I can move it around. I can get it so that we have it. Oops, tap the brakes. Get that up there. Okay, so we can move all that around and stuff. Then we can analyze our graph for the zeros. Menu, analyze graph, zeros. Now, what I will tell you is, when you do that, if you haven't done this before, it gives you a dashed line. You hit the middle button right here, you hit that button, and it locks that line in, and then you slide, oops, tap the brakes, I gotta go over here and do this. So then you slide it across, and it gives you, and as well, it keeps going. If you keep going, it tells you the zero. Unfortunately, you gotta do each zero individually. Okay? And then when you hit that middle button again, it just will tell you what you just found. So we just found the zero at 3 halves. Now, going forward, I will also tell you this, that I have seen many times that when people try and analyze the graph and find the zero, they try and get as close to the zero as they can, or as close to the maximum as they can. That's just dumb. Okay? Let the calculator be an aid to you. You don't have to be exact with the calculator. Okay? Let the calculator, I could start way over here if I wanted to, and it would still give me that zero as long as there's a zero in that shaded area. Okay? If there's not a zero in that shaded area, it's not going to give me one. Okay? So don't try and be like exact with it when you can just be regular with it. Okay? So that's my little helpful hint. Oops, tap the brakes. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Where'd it go? Come on now. Do it. This one. That's the one I wanted. It looks better. Okay. Handle? Love it. Excited to be part of it. Okay? When solving by factoring, after we factor the quadratic, does anybody remember why it is mathematically legal to set each factor to zero?
We're looking for when the graph intersects the x-axis.
But why can I set, if I go back a slide here, why can, in green here, why can I set those factors?
Because multiplying anything by 0 is 0.
Can I clean it up? When I multiply two things together and the result is 0, one of them's got to be 0. Yep, there you go. Yep. Okay, it's called the zero product property. When you're multiplying and the result is 0, one of the parts, one of the factors has to be 0. So mathematically, we have to find all of the instances where that happens, so we set all of the factors equal to 0. Okay? Love it. Okay? Completing the square. Okay? First thing we got to do with completing the square is we've got to get it equal to 0. Common theme. So if I'm going to get it equal to 0, first I'm going to distribute over there. That gives me 2x minus 10. Then I'm going to, subtract 2x and add 10 at the same time. Most of this I understand you're doing in your head. That's fine. 2x squared, or x squared, minus 6x plus 21, and I finally got it equal to 0. Okay? Now, in my head I'm thinking, well, now I want to see if I can factor that. Okay? And are there two numbers that multiply together to be 21 and add together to be negative 6? And the answer to that is no. 1 and 21, I would get 20 or 22, depending on if I add or subtract them. 3 and 7, I'd get 4 or 10. Neither of those are 6, so we can't do it that way. So then what we do is we change this back to a quadratic on one side, and we move the constant to the other side. And then we leave a gap that we're going to fill in. Okay? So we move that constant back over to the right side. Then for me, I like to go off on the side. Most of the time I do it in my brain, but I like to go off to the side and I like to say, well, b here is negative 6. That's my b value right there. It's my linear term, my linear coefficient. Then I like to say that, well, if b is negative 6, I like to divide that by 2. And I like that to be negative 3. Because negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. And then I like to square that. And I get positive 9. Now the reason I do that is because this gap that I created is going to be filled with that b over 2 quantity squared number. So I'm going to fill that gap with 9. But what have I done now to my equation? What have I done to my equation? If you think of a balance, or a teeter-totter, if you will. Okay? We added 9 more to one side, so what happened? We're tipped, right? Do we want to be tipped? No, we want to be back in balance. So what do we have to do? Add 9 to the other side. Yep. What we do to one side, we got to do to the other, so I got to add 9 over there. Okay? Now, cool thing here is left side becomes x minus 3 quantity squared equals, and that's going to be negative 12. This b over 2 number will always be this number inside the squared parentheses, inside the squared term there. That's one of the cool parts about completing the square. Okay. So now I got x minus 3 quantity squared equals negative 12. What do we do? Want to solve it? What do we do? Square root both sides. Love it. We're going to square root both sides. Left side, what do I get? X minus 3. Love it. Right side, what do I get? What do I get on the right side? Close. Ding, ding, ding. Bingo, bingo, bango. Anytime that we take an even root, we got to remember that plus or minus on it. Okay? Think about it this way. Yes, 5 times 5 is 25. Okay? But negative 5 times negative 5 is also 25. Okay? So that plus or minus is coming into play. And then to finish it off, we just add 3 to both sides. So I get 3 plus or minus 2i times the square root of 3 there as my answer. Okay? Love it. Quad form. Anybody remember what the quadratic formula is? Opposite. Oops, tap the brakes. I got to get back into my other. One more over. Opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4AC, I heard. All over 2A. Love it. Excited to be part of it. Okay? Again, set it equal to 0. We got to get it equal to 0 first. Okay? And then we just kind of fill in numbers. So x here is going to equal the opposite of -6 plus or minus big square root. -6 quantity squared minus 4 times 3 times -5 all over 2 times 3. Okay? And then we can do some maths. Opposite of -6 is +6. -6 squared is 36 there for that one. 4 times 3 is 12 times -5 is -60. 36 minus -60 is 96. And 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, love it. 96 is 16 times 6. Just trust me on this one. We're running short on the time. Plus minus 4 times the square root of 6 all over 6. And that you want to be your answer, but it still is factorable, or it's reducible, I should say, provided the outside numbers all have the same common factor, which they do. So x here is going to equal 3 plus or minus 2 square roots of 6 all over 3. Okay? There are tons and tons of videos on the interwebs that deal with solving by factoring, solving by completing the square, solving by quadratic formula, and solving by graphing. We are not going to require you to watch any of those videos. Just know that they're out there if you need that extra help. Okay? Okay? We are through a good chunk of P5 now, so if you wanted to start your P5 homework this weekend, that would be great. Remember, you don't have class on Monday, but you also have P1, P2, and P3 that you're doing on your own. Okay? And all of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 are due next week, Thursday. Thanks for playing along. Have a great weekend.